from the Ticats Audio Network, this is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
Are two all-star QBs too many in BC? Win, lose, or tie? And where have these Tiger Cats been hiding? Well, the CFL's stretch drive is officially here, and not one team is without a question. Two, maybe even three. And that's where this week's guest will be offering all the answers. This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm Bubba O'Neil, and topping the charts with yet another wonderful trio of three-down lovers from across the nation. So let's introduce them. Well, he's coming off a bye week, so he's certainly ready and raring to go. The voice of the Double E on 630 CHED. I'll tell you, Morley Scott, it has been wonderful to see you.
It's been good times in Edmonton lately, so it's happy to talk to you, Bubba.
Absolutely. Hey, when it pertains to sports in the nation's capital, this fella, he's got his hands all over it. The voice of the Ottawa Redblacks, AJ Jakubec.
Great to be with you, Bubs. A lot. It's exciting for Morley and I because we actually have some wins to talk about after some pretty dreadful post-pandemic years.
It's been some lean years for sure. And from Calgary, he's the architect of the Couch Potato Diary, talking Stampeders football all day long. He's primetime Peter Klein.
Yeah, I don't know what these wins are that the other folks are talking about out here in Calgary, but ties sure seem fun, don't they?
Oh, we're going to get right into it. Let's start with you, Peter. Yeah, I mean, you were right there. For the second time this season in the Canadian Football League, a game has ended in a tie. I don't know what you think. Is it a suitable conclusion, or do games, at least in this league, need a winner?
I have gone back and forth on this because ties are very annoying, right? Like that is the main thing, is if for nothing else, they look weird in the standings, the -1 at the end, and then everyone else has to have a -0 after it. All of it is just very, very weird and annoying. But I also understand that football is rather hard on the human body. And so asking these guys to go all night in just continuous car crashes does seem a little much, you know? And so I do think while it is, again, frustrating, and we need a black and white world of winners and losers, and someone must prevail. I do think that in at least, obviously, just the regular season, having a tie is okay so that you don't have these guys going until 3 a.m. just bludgeoning each other playing football. That's when serious injuries can happen, is when people get tired. So I think that for the sport that we are playing, it is a suitable outcome, even if it is a little bit annoying.
All right, Morley, what do you think?
I'm kind of in the same boat. I'd like to see. I hate the third column in the standings because it just interrupts everything when you're talking about teams are 7-6 and 7-6 and 7-5-1 or whatever the case may be. So I'm not a big fan of that. I think add one more series to the overtime. Add one more series. Make it 3 chances to get points, and I bet you we get rid of maybe half the ties at the very least. I don't think it happens enough outside of Ottawa and Calgary. It doesn't happen enough around the Canadian Football League that we need to be worried about it. I saw Derek Taylor threw that stat out there this week that I think since 2017 or something, every tie in the league has involved either Ottawa or Calgary, and they've tied each other a couple of times in there as well, which is just weird, really, when you think about it. But I think it's not a big enough issue that we have to worry about it. It doesn't happen as often as as other things do that maybe they need to worry about first. But I'm okay with it for now. I think, especially now, check the standings in the West. It adds so much more intrigue in it now into the Western race because there's 2 teams with a tie, and so that's an extra point. And now it kind of eliminates ties in the standings, and so you're going to have to leapfrog someone and get past them. So I don't know. I'm game for leaving it the way it is. It's, as I said, I don't think it happens often enough that it's going to be bothersome to the league. I'm kind of in the same boat as with the Rouge to win a game. It happens once every 4 years, so it's not that big a deal to me.
But AJ, to me, I'm invested. I invested watching 60 minutes of football plus a little overtime, and then when it's over, I'm kind of looking around like, that's it. Like, I feel very unfulfilled.
Yeah, I feel bad for everybody who goes home after the game and someone at home says, did they win? And you go, no. Oh, they lost. And you go, no. You just don't know how to explain it sometimes.
Well, at the very least, only one tie in the CFL since 2007, as Derek Taylor mentioned, involved a game where both teams won, lost, and tied. And that was the Ottawa-Saskatchewan game earlier this year, where Ottawa thought they won. There was the pass interference that nullified the one play. Saskatchewan kept going. Then they thought they won, and then everyone left the field. And I was getting texts after the game, oh, I see Ottawa lost. No, it was actually a tie. So, honestly, I don't have a problem with it. I've called 3 ties in my 10-year CFL broadcasting career. It didn't leave me unfulfilled. I didn't want to quit because I actually called ties instead of wins. Maybe it's the fact that I grew up a soccer fan. Maybe it's the fact that I grew up a hockey fan when they actually had ties and not this silly shootout that they bring. This is a football show. I get it. I'm not going to go into why I dislike the shootout in the National Hockey League, but I don't have a problem with it. And what you see in NCAA football, where it goes to like 9 overtimes and they just go one play. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see a 2-point convert decide things on the 8th overtime when it's not an actual series. So I think they've got it right. Player safety is so important. I know it's lip service, but really we're going to start bringing in more football when these guys are just banging each other each and every play just to satisfy the 18 people that are pissed off and are never coming to a CFL game or watching another CFL game because it's a tie. No, I got no time for that.
Peter, I'll start with you. Here's my solution to the big problem here. I don't think you need – I'm okay with the 2 mini games, but in my opinion, starting at the 35-yard line is too easy. You basically have to move the ball 7 yards, and your kicker is basically kicking an extra point. How about keeping the 2 mini games, but start at the 55 and go from there?
Yeah,
I think you're going to – I don't think there would be any ties.
Yeah, because like basically with how field goal kickers have kind of grown, we're seeing it in the NFL and here in the CFL as well. You are basically starting in field goal range already when you're starting at the 35. So it does. I think you could do kind of a hybrid of it where, okay, the first ones are at the 35 and now the next one you go back to the 45. And to Morley's, if we go for a third one, it's at the 55. And I know I just said we don't want more football, and now I'm literally adding more yards for them to get to. So I am talking out of both sides of my mouth. But I do think that maybe there are a couple of ways of tinkering it, but to Morley's point, this only comes up a couple of times. I think that Randy Ambrosie would love to live in a world where the biggest thing he had to find a solution for was ties. I think that he would really appreciate that as a commissioner, but I do understand the frustration of like, we went to a game, we had all this investment, and then you just, at the end, well, the real win were the friends you made along the way. And so I understand that there is a bit of a frustration. This year has just been weird in general. Of course, we're going to have 2 ties. Every team, with the exception of maybe 2, are the exact same. So, of course, this is going to be the year with a couple of ties. But no, I don't mind tinkering with it a little bit. But I do, to AJ's point, I don't want us to get to an NHL-style shootout where we're just kicking like 65-yard field goals at the end, and the first one misses is the loser. I think we can accept the ties, even if it is a little clunky at times.
Morley, what about my idea? Starting at the 55 and not the 35.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you'd get more wins or not out of that. I think you'd get more teams punting and looking for a rouge, maybe. I don't know, because especially with just 3 downs, right? You get one quarterback sack in that, and all of a sudden you're on your own side of center field trying to get points. And I think that might negate points more than anything else. I would like to see them
resolution. It would give us a quicker resolution.
I don't know. I think the solution would be just a third series in overtime, just a third round of the shootout, and because someone's going to make a mistake, and I think what would decide it in those cases is probably the 2-point convert, having to go for a 2-point convert after every touchdown. And I think I'm guessing that's where a lot of ties get broken in overtime, is teams missing the 2-point convert after they tie the game up again. So, yeah, I want to see 3 rounds. That would solve it for me. I bet you we'd have like 1 tie every 5 or 6 years if we go to 3 rounds. And it's not a lot more football. That's 2 or 3 more plays, right? From the 55, you're adding maybe 5, 6, 7 plays.
Probably. AJ, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't hate it, but I again, like, what are you adding it for in terms of the trade-off with player safety? I think that's most important because you're talking about, like, you can talk about how many more plays it is or how many more series it is, but at that point in time of the game where they've already played 60 minutes, or do we really need to be adding more plays? Like, every play is a possibility, and I get it. It's football. Every play is always a possibility for an injury, but it's especially when they're that tired, having gone through 60 minutes. I just don't know you want to be adding more plays. Look, I'm not one of those, like, are we going to stop playing tackle football, guys? Like, because of concussions. Like, I know how serious it is, but everyone knows what they signed up for, and so it's a violent game. And I played 3 years of minor football. I appreciated the fact that I played. I love the fact that I played. I do it again, knowing what I know about the game. But I do think there's constraints and limits on certain things. And to me, you don't want to be playing football into 3 or 4 overtimes and more series and all that type of stuff. So while that might solve my problems in terms of entertainment value, it's still about the players and their best well-being. At least it should be. And I don't think adding more plays in overtime solves anything.
I do wonder if we just kind of bailed on kicks in overtime. Like we said, you start at the 35, you're basically in field goal range. We've already made rules where you can't kick the single point. You have to go for 2. What if we say you just can't kick at all? You have to go, like, no field goals in overtime. So 3rd and 35, you just got sacked a couple times and took a holding. You got to go for it no matter what. I wonder if that's something to kind of mix with it a little bit to take that kind of safety net away from these teams.
I kind of like that.
Honestly, the best idea from my standpoint of all the different, that is the one thing that I'd be able to get behind, because it does rub me the wrong way that you're at the 35, your defense could make a play, and maybe it's a tackle for loss and a sack, maybe it's 2 plays, and they still kick a 52-yard field goal, even though they just went in reverse. That does rub me a little bit the wrong way in overtime. So that would be, of all the different solutions, and you might end up with more ties for all I care, but I'd rather actually have more ties than more games where teams just trade field goals in overtime when no one actually does anything.
You got my vote, Peter. The clean sweep, Morley, to you.
I like it. I still want to go to 3 series first, but I like that. It's not a bad idea, actually. I think it would, when the ball's in the air, great things can happen, right? When you're throwing the football from a touchdown to a first down to a pick 6 or whatever. So it's more action, that's for sure. I don't mind it. I don't mind it.
Well, Peter, we here at the CFL This Week anoint you the new commissioner of the Canadian Football League. Well done. Well done. Did you think of that on the fly? Or were you up all night?
Yes. I did, yeah. It's funny because the last time I was on here, I was saying that teams should go for it more on 3rd down and should go for 2-point conversions. And so it seems like I have a vendetta against kickers. I promise that's not it.
No.
Love Pat McAfee and all those guys.
No.
But it was just something I kind of thought of. I don't know if I want full commissioner status. I'll take director of overtime, though. That seems like it would be fine.
All right, I'll come right back to you on this, Peter. Poor performance by Nathan Rourke at home, let's be honest, against the Argonauts. In fact, the offense was not very good for the BC Lions. Quarterback change to Vernon Adams Jr. did not produce any differences. Straight up, do we have a quarterback controversy that's been born by itself in BC?
Yes, we absolutely do. It is a very weird scenario because I think Vernon Adams is one of maybe 2 quarterbacks in the league where you would have this controversy. If Nathan Rourke had come to Calgary, I don't think anyone would be clamoring for mayor over him at this point. But because he's going to the place with a guy who is on pace to break Doug Flutie records, you set yourself up for this. And so while I appreciate the loyalty of BC to Vernon Adams and everything that goes along with that, I do think that they have that they have a controversy on their hands. And you have 2 very competitive guys and 2 of the best quarterbacks in the league. One of them sitting seems insane. And so now you do have this situation where Nathan Rourke, it looked good in that the win against Ottawa, but it still looks like things are moving a little bit quicker for him. There's just, instead of 3-step drop and go, it's 3-step drop and let's look. and let's see. And I'm getting hit by a large human now. And it doesn't feel like it's clicking as quickly as it should. And for Vernon Adams, obviously the process was processing for him when he was working in the beginning part of the season before he got hurt. So I do think there is a legitimate quarterback controversy there with two of the most talented quarterbacks in the league who probably never would have envisioned being in a quarterback controversy in their CFL career. But here we are.
AJ?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a controversy, but here's the thing. They're better off for that controversy. Just like the Edmonton Elks are better off having both Trey Ford and McLeod Bethel Thompson, even though a lot of fans there were upset at the start of the season that MBT was brought in. Well, when Trey Ford finally got his opportunity, and maybe it should have come earlier, Bethel Thompson wasn't really the reason they were losing a bunch of games. They were losing all these close games that were decided by one or two plays. But, Trey Ford showed that absolutely he's capable of starting in the league, but then he gets hurt and, Edmonton doesn't hit the skids because they've got someone capable when Trey Ford goes down. The same applies to Ottawa this year with Jeremiah Masoli, who won the game in Calgary as the starting quarterback, a game that they probably don't win if they don't have that 1-2 punch. Same goes for Davis Alexander in Montreal. And, I can go, look, I grew up in Edmonton and I've spent almost 20 years in Ottawa. So let's just look at the last Grey Cup wins that these organizations have had for the most part. I mean, I know Mike Riley in 2015 was a different story. He was the undisputed number one. But I grew up in Edmonton at the tail end of the dynasty when you had Warren Moon and Tom Wilkinson. Controversy? I don't think of it as a controversy. I think of 5 straight Grey Cups. How about 1987 when Tracy Ham wasn't even the backup? He was the number 3 quarterback. You had Damon Allen and Matt Dunnigan there. And you look at Ottawa, their last Grey Cup before the Redblacks came in was in 76, Tom Clements and Condredge Holloway. And in 2016, the only other year Ottawa's had 2 legitimate starters other than this year with Masoli and Drew Brown was 2016 with Henry Burris and Trevor Harris. And that wasn't rosy. There's a reason that team finished 8-9-1 because they dealt with adversity. First, Hank got hurt to start the year. Then Trevor got hurt. Then Hank came back too early. Then he got benched. He was pissed off. Then Trevor came in. He got benched. He was pissed off. And in the end, guess what? Ottawa won the Grey Cup. So when you've got 2 legitimate quarterbacks like that, I know, look, form is temporary, class is permanent. And both of those guys are class quarterbacks. Are there going to be some problems and some rocky roads along the way? Sure. But once it gets down to crunch time, they know they've got 2 legitimate options to win games. We'll see how it shakes out, but I don't think BC's in a bad situation at all, even if it is regarded as a controversy.
But AJ, to your point, everything you said there was absolutely bang on point and obviously historically proven. The only difference I would say is that in those situations, it basically started out in camp that way, right? And there was an understanding. Yep. You could develop even friendships. Rourke just kind of came up with what basically half a season left to go, and there would have been an establishment, a relationship built with the offense with Vernon Adams Jr. And to the fact that I think only 1 receiver from Nathan Rourke's days remain on that roster right now. So if I'm one of those receivers, I'm probably thinking VA's my guy, right? Like, I think that's where the controversy to me sort of. I'm sure they're doing their best to keep it all within the locker room, but still, in times of crisis, we know how players sometimes react.
Yeah, and look, that's fair, and there's no doubt there would have been some people that were raising their eyebrows, especially like I think it caught everyone a little bit off guard. It's not like there were rumors for weeks that he was coming back to the CFL and maybe where was he going to sign? Could it be BC? Is he going? Like, it just happened. So I think that probably caught everybody a little off guard. Look, they're going to have to deal with that. That's the bottom line. And again, whether it started at camp or it happened mid-season, I just go back to 2016 and knowing just some of the turmoil that was the year Hank told TSN to shove it. I mean, there was a lot of kind of behind the scenes turmoil that they were able to, and Rick Campbell dealt with that. Rick Campbell's the coach there. So he knew, like I saw it firsthand. I mean, Henry was a true pro, but he was pissed when he got benched. And same with Trevor Harris. So like those were two guys that were very competitive, that wanted to be the number one quarterback, even though, yes, Trevor Harris came in knowing in 1 year he was going to be the guy. I mean, Henry was, and let's be honest, Henry was still pissed off when he left. So it caused a lot of bad feelings for sure, but it also caused the only Grey Cup that Ottawa's won since I was 1 year old. So I think it worked out.
All right. Well, we've kind of seen something similar in Edmonton. Morley, your thoughts on what's going on out west?
Well, first off, with the situation with BC is there's a fine line when you're talking Nathan Rourke and Vernon Adams Jr. There's a fine line between controversy and abundance of riches, right? I mean, can the coach make a bad decision here? Rick Campbell's got two starting quarterbacks that he has to find one that's hot and play him. And if one's not playing well, he goes to the other one. I think it's a good situation for them for the rest of the year. It's going to push those two guys to play better. I think long-term, obviously, Nathan Rourke's the guy, and there's a lot of GMs around the league sitting back and waiting for Vernon Adams to be on the trade market or be released in the off season. But for now, they're both in BC, and they're probably going to make that team better. There's a fine line between, as I mentioned, between controversy and an abundance of riches. But having two starting quarterbacks and having no starting quarterbacks is a pretty big gap. And a lot of teams over the years have been in the other side of it and dying for someone to take control of the job. And no one ever did. Now BC's got two guys who can do it. I think they're in a pretty good position for the rest of this season. They've got obviously some decisions to make at the end of the year, but right now, I don't think Rick Campbell can make a mistake in the guy he chooses, unless there's a crack in the dressing room where there's a bunch of Vernon Adams guys and a bunch of Nathan Rourke guys. And if they don't get their guy, they're going to have issues. But I don't see that being the case right now in BC. I can't see that happening when you got two guys who are both good quarterbacks.
Can I just throw this out, guys? Does Nate? I mean, I think the expectation for all of us, or many of us, to think that Nathan Rourke was going to come out and be the guy that we saw 2 years ago in 2022 was going to be the case. But does he look right to you, Morley, right now?
It's hard to say. He hasn't played football in a long time, right? He's been on PRs. He's just been in practice games. And even we hear the stories about even in a lot of the training camp scenarios for him, he never got any reps. So it's been a long time. And the games, especially for a quarterback, I think are vastly different. And I think he's got to get his mojo back a little bit. And the only way you do that is by playing, right? I know a lot of people thought that, he'd come back and halfway through the season, he'd be on pace to lead the league, but I don't think anybody thought it would be in interceptions, right? But that seems to be the case. So he's a great quarterback, and he proved it a couple of years ago. I think he's just got to play, and he's got to knock the rust of the last of his NFL tours off. I mean, he was on 4 teams and never got to play a snap in a game that wasn't a preseason game. So I think they'll be fine in BC at quarterback spot. Obviously, Nathan Rourke's the guy moving forward because he's signed to that big deal for 2. I guess it's 2 years after this year, right? So I think he's the guy they're going to count on next year. If you're talking about next year, they got a problem to deal with. But if you're talking about this year, they got 2 starting quarterbacks.
Peter, who are you going to start? Who's your starter?
Man, I think I do go with Vernon Adams. It is a tricky situation. And to Morley's point, out here in Calgary, Dave Dickinson is shedding no tears for what's going on in BC. You have to choose between Rourke and Vernon Adams. I just had to choose between the quarterback who had 7 turnovers and the one who had 5. So woe is me. So there isn't a whole lot of sympathy out here for that. But I do think you go with Vernon Adams. I think with Rourke, if he's any other quarterback, this isn't a discussion, right? Like if Jake Dolegala was out there playing the way that Nathan Rourke had played over the last few weeks, then there would be Vernon Adams' chance ringing out throughout all of BC. But because it's Nathan Rourke, and we have seen him do it very well before, you give him a bit of leash. The one thing I worry about with all of that is, to Morley's point, he hasn't played football in a long time. And so it is weird for me to say, okay, that this guy, he hasn't played football, he just needs the reps. So let's bench him this week and put Vernon Adams in. But this is still a very close playoff race, and there is not a whole lot separating any of these teams in the West Division standings right now, and you need every win you can get, or a tie, I guess. But every point you can get, you have to go out there and do that. And right now, I just think Vernon Adams gives them the best chance to win. And that's basically the entirety of this decision for BC.
Hey, can I ask, was anybody surprised they took him out last week? I mean, he just led them on that touchdown drive, scored the touchdown at the end of the half, and I thought, okay, here he goes. You know, he's got himself going for this game. Next thing you know, he's got a sour look and a baseball cap on.
That was very surprising. Very surprising.
Was surprised. I think there was, to be honest, the performance of the offensive line, I thought, was the biggest issue in that game. They were not very good protecting either one of the quarterbacks. AJ, last one to you here. Who do you start?
Yeah, I mean, when you asked, does Nathan Rourke look right this year? I mean, if anyone watched the game in Victoria, he certainly looked right that game. So if he hadn't had a game like that, then maybe, look, there's been inconsistencies, and that has to be a lot of different things, like just dealing with everything he dealt with, you know, going from team to team in the NFL, not playing football. It's not just going to be a straight line, playing better every week where you're not very good game one, you're a little bit better game two, you bring it game three in Victoria against Ottawa, you beat Montreal. So there's going to be some setbacks. Obviously, he struggled, but the entire offense struggled. And as mentioned, the offensive line was a big part of that. I'd go with him another week. I mean, you got some time now because they got the bye week here right now, but I would probably come out of the bye week with Nathan Rourke. And if he struggles, you know, you've got the Vernon Adams Jr. card to play, but I wouldn't be making a change as my starter just based on one bad half, based on the previous couple of games where you started to see some progress from Rourke. So I would start Rourke next game.
All right, guys. There was a situation on Saturday where the Ottawa Redblacks, and I'll start with you, AJ, on this, were in a situation where they could clinch their first playoff spot in many years. I believe 2018 would be the last time they were made the postseason. And I've heard some people say, well, you know, Ottawa might have been looking forward to their big game against Montreal. I don't buy that. I don't think any Bob Dice team is going to be in that mindset. So I'll throw it to you in this sense, based on the end result. How impressed were you with the Tiger Cats and how they, you know, kind of scrapped this game out and came out flying?
Yeah, and to answer the first part of your question, I know they said all the right things in the media. It was funny, you know, on social media, you see different things. And I saw someone reply to me something along the lines of all week, all they talked about was playoffs. And I'm like, well, that's what they were asked about all week. And all week, basically, they like 98% of the answers I got from Bob Dice to different coaches to different players, when you asked them about the playoffs, they just said, we're just looking at the next game. We just want to win the next game. And I do think, like, you might have been able to sell me on they were looking ahead to the Montreal game had playoffs not been a factor. But I do think the fact that they had that in their minds, that they wanted to clinch, they wanted to finish ahead of Hamilton, they wanted to finish things off from that perspective and go on to the next goal. I don't think they were looking ahead to Montreal at all. I didn't get that sense being at practice all week. So, yeah, I was very impressed with the Ticats. I mean, there's no doubt in that football game. Like, Ottawa didn't play their best game. They didn't play a clean game. But you look at the impact that Chris Jones has had on that defense. And, you know, a couple of turnovers. Nick Usher was an absolute beast. And, you know, they struggled to run the football at times as well. So that was a real solid three-phase performance, really, from the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They got the kick return for the touchdown. The defense certainly stepped up and kept Ottawa in check and created some turnovers in the offense. You know, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't perfect from the Ticats, but late in the game, with that 29-21 lead, with Ottawa coming back, and that those are the types of games, because 2 weeks ago or 2 weeks prior, we were watching the game against Winnipeg, and there was that, I thought Hamilton got hosed on a call that should have been pass interference. They didn't call it. They settled for the field goal. and then Winnipeg comes back to win that football game. And I saw that football game, a variation of that football game, and I'm sure Morley did as well, over the last couple of years. Maybe not so much in 2019 and 2021 when Ottawa was just overmatched, but the last couple of seasons, and in particular last year, where Ottawa just found ways to lose, that was that game in a nutshell. And I watched that game and I said, they're going to find a way to lose this game because I've seen this movie before. And the fact that they've been able to turn that around, and I know it's just 2 wins, but win a couple of games, it feels like there's a little bit of belief there. And when Ottawa got to 29-21, there were probably some Ticats fans saying, oh, here we go again. We've seen this before this year. And they punched right back and just ran it down Ottawa's throats on that game-clinching drive to make it 37-21. So I was impressed by the Ticats. The beauty of the CFL this year, and I think Peter alluded to it a little bit, saying that everyone looks the same, but essentially there's no real bad team. There's no team that if you show up and bring your C-plus game, if you're a top team in the league, that you're just going to roll over. That's just the way it is. I mean, Edmonton, even though record-wise they're 5-8, that's got to be one of the scariest teams if they happen to make the playoffs every week. It's so true this year. I know they say it in pro football all the time, but there's always some doormats that win 3 or 4 games. I've seen it firsthand that, quite frankly, aren't capable of winning week in, week out. They're just not. And it feels like this year the bottom teams are, which is great for the league. It's great for parity. It's fun. It makes these conversations really interesting where all of a sudden Hamilton, okay, do they have to run the table? Maybe they have 1 game tops that they could lose. But when you see performances like they've had the last 3 weeks, even in the loss in Winnipeg, you think, okay, this team's at least capable of beating some teams and a lot of good teams down the stretch, given some of the momentum that they're starting to build.
Yeah, the Chris Jones defense has certainly been a difference maker. It's just plain and simple. Like, the numbers are there to prove it, and the performances that, anyone that's watching the Ticats on a play-by-play basis, it's with all due respect to Mark Washington, it's a complete difference. I'm shocked that it made such a difference, but it does make it make you wonder that, okay, if they can't maybe reach the Argonauts, Morley, all of a sudden, the West is just so unpredictable that we might see for the first time, there is a possibility, depending on how the Ticats win, they got to win, of maybe that crossover.
It's kind of cool. Like, for the first time since I can remember, the crossover's alive both ways, right? The East is looking at the West, and the West is looking at the East. The top 3 teams in the league from the East, I don't know if that's ever happened in most of our lifetimes. It's been, I think, in the early 80s since the last time that happened. So, it's kind of cool. I think it's going to make the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks of the season really entertaining to watch. Those stupid ties are going to create a havoc, though, aren't they, in the standings as we move forward? Maybe we should address that at some point. I don't know. But, yeah, I think it's great. I think it's going to be a great finish. And as far as Hamilton goes, Chris Jones obviously makes a difference. And I think it just goes to the point that everyone around here was saying Jones was doing too much. He's obviously proved in the last month, if you focus on just one thing, especially him in defense, he's going to have success, and he's had some success there. So he's despite the numbers I think the Elks put up defensively the last couple of years, he's a pretty smart guy defensively, and I think when that's all he's got to worry about, you're going to have a pretty good defense. And he's got some of the players on that team are guys that he brought into the league, and I think they're his kind of players. So I think he'll be able to have some success with them, and we'll see if they can get back into the race or not. I mean, they're a long way up. They're playing with, they're playing with no pressure, right? Because they buried themselves early. They're kind of like the Elks, but in a worse situation because they haven't won as many games. But I mean, no one was expecting them to come back. No one's expecting them to get back in the race. Now here they are back in the race. So, there's something to be said for the next 5 to 6 weeks for some entertaining football going both east to west and west to east, possibly.
Primetime Klein, with the Calgary playing the way they are, who knows what could happen?
No, exactly, right? Like it has not been an overly inspiring month or couple of years out here in Calgary. But like, yeah, to your point, like asking if Ottawa had overlooked Hamilton, I don't know if anyone can overlook anyone at this point. Like what you guys were saying, like Edmonton and Hamilton were dead and buried a month ago, and now we're a couple good months away from like, oh yeah, no, they could meet in the Grey Cup. It has been a very, very strange year, and out here in Calgary, it's been so inconsistent. And for a while, they were 4-0 at home and then 0-4 on the road. And then they couldn't even win at home. And then they get a tie against the best team in the league at home, which out here is almost grounds for a parade, the way it's gone the last month or two. So, no, it's been very strange. And to kind of the overall point of everything we've talked about today, no one can feel comfortable, right? Like BC doesn't have time to give Nathan Rourke some extra reps just to see if he can get it back to his old form. Edmonton, you just got to go with the quarterback that's working for you right now. Winnipeg, they built up a bit of a hole. They worked out of it very well, but they don't really have time to deal with any more injuries or anything like that. Saskatchewan just has to figure it all out. Like all of these teams have everything going against them. Even Montreal, who has that pretty little X beside them in the standings, that home field advantage in the East final is no guarantee. It is going to be an absolute sprint to the finish. And you guys are right. Like out here in the West, the worry of an East crossover has never come up before. And even when I was a kid, I grew up in Saskatchewan, and there's the 5 and the 4. I had people tell, oh no, the East actually isn't allowed to cross over into the West because they were too many teams. And I believed that for a few years because I had no evidence that suggested otherwise. And so it's a weird situation, but it is a credit to Hamilton and a credit to that defense. And that has to have been a very big frustrating point for, I'm sure, Ticats fans and certainly people on the Ticats offense, because the offense has been clicking all season long. Probably a few too many turnovers, but like Bo Levi Mitchell putting up numbers, and that offense has been putting up stats. It's just the other teams are putting up more numbers, and that is, how you lose football games. So the fact that they're getting that figured out, when you see it all start to come together and you realize the talent and some of the talented players that Hamilton has on the defensive side, and now they're being maximized, it makes them a bit of a scary team going forward, for sure.
It has been fun to watch, and all of a sudden Tiger Town are doing a lot of talking right now, and everyone, that off the bandwagon, on the bandwagon thing that I think every team in the CFL, every fan base for pretty much all sports, it can be that way. Guys, this is, to me, mind-blowing, this question, because we kind of centered on maybe 1, 2, 3 players earlier in the season. Now, I'll start with you, AJ. Who is the CFL's most outstanding player at this point to you?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. Like for me, it hasn't been decided in terms of my vote, and not even close, because I like to see, the totality of things. I think like Bo Levi Mitchell, in terms of the quarterback, statistically is probably having the best season, but his team's 4-9, and if they don't make the playoffs, look, if the Hamilton Tiger Cats make the playoffs on this crazy run and Bo Levi Mitchell lights it up down the stretch, then maybe you can convince me that he's the guy. I mean, I don't even know who I'm going to vote for Ottawa's MOP. We'll see who comes out of Montreal. It feels like it's going to be the best player on the best team, so that's probably Cody Fajardo. I mean, maybe you could have convinced me on a Philpott out of there. Maybe it's William Standback in BC, or a Justin McInnes, based on, the 2 quarterback system there. But if you're to tell me right now, I'd probably say Cody Fajardo, but I think it's so wide open down the stretch. And that's going to be beyond the standings and how everything shakes out between now and the end of the season. It's going to be fun to see the MOP race, because that thing is far from decided.
Morley?
I don't know. It's weird. You look at some of the stats, and the thing that jumps out at me, I'm just looking at like some of the quarterback stats. The guys who lead the league in passing at this moment: Bo Levi Mitchell, Jake Mayer, and McLeod Bethel Thompson. They've all lost their jobs this year at some point because they weren't playing well. And then throw in Vernon Adams Jr., same situation. He lost his job even though he was playing well when Nathan Rourke returned. So it's a weird year to try and. I think the stats are just really topsy-turvy this year. And there's so many times I've looked at something and gone, Well, it's just not right. I mean, like Bo Levi Mitchell was leading the league in touchdown passes, leading the league in passing yards, leading the league in red zone efficiency, and the Tiger Cats give him the hook, right, for Powell. And it's like, it just, a lot of it doesn't make sense. Now McLeod Bethel Thompson's got his game going, his best as it's been. And really, I think he's over 3,000 yards now. He's on pace for one of his, if not his best season ever. And he's getting the hook to let Trey Ford come back in. Jake Mayer, second in passing. He's getting the hook. It's usually a quarterback award, but I don't know if the MOP is going to be a quarterback this year. I think they need to call it the MOP of the final third this year, because I think the guy who plays the best in the final 6 games of his team's season this year is going to win the MOP. Right now, it's up in the air for me. I just don't know who. Maybe this is going to be the year that a quarterback doesn't win the MOP. Maybe it's going to be Roland Milligan or somebody from the defensive side of the ball that's going to win the MOP. Because right now it's a coin toss for me. I really, if I had to vote today, I'd really have a hard time figuring it out.
It's so difficult, and Peter, I'm kind of thinking, is it maybe by default, Solomon Eliminian kind of year, right? That maybe, I don't know, a Tyrese Beverett, or who could it possibly be that you're going to have to start looking at defensive statistics and say, this is wide open. It's that wide open, because this is always, for the most part, an offensive, whoever had the best offensive season award.
Absolutely. And it just kind of goes to everything else that we've talked about how close everything is. And you go through, like you said, Morley, the top 3 passers in the league are all guys who have been benched at different points this season. Okay, well, maybe there's been a running back who stood out. Well, the top 5 guys in rushing touchdowns are all quarterbacks who do the 1-yard quarterback sneak-in thing. Okay, well, maybe that's out. All right, who's the number 1 receiver? And then, okay, Justin McInnis. I can hear that argument for sure. Number 2 is Philpott, who would have kind of been a runaway for this if he hadn't got hurt, and now he's going to miss the entirety of the season. And so it does, you just kind of keep looping in all of these things. And so I kind of thought I'd come in, you know what, defensive players, and you guys both mentioned the 2 guys I was thinking of in Roland Milligan because of the interceptions, and Tyrese Beverett because you watch a Montreal game and it seems like they've cloned him, because there's no way he can get to everything. There must be 5 of him on the field at one time because he is in on everything. Milligan, the case for him gets a little bit less with Ford being tied with him in interceptions. I think if you're going to have that award, even with Elimimian, like everything kind of fell to him, but he was also very good that year. And there isn't even that standout defensive player that is really going about things. And it shows how close this is, not to pump up too much of what I do, but doing the best bets for 3 down. At some point, the entire column is just going to be don't, because there's nothing predictable about anything going on this year. And with the MOP, for so long in this league, we've talked about how, well, the season really starts after Labor Day. And that's kind of the case with this MLP race, is like, if Nathan Rourke had a good 7 weeks, maybe, because there isn't a whole lot there. And so I do think at the end of the day, it is tempting to go to AJ's point of, well, yeah, Bo, he's on a team that has 4 wins right now and they're not in the playoffs. And if it was MVP, then yeah. But this is most outstanding. And I think when you look at the accumulation of the season, and it's weird to say, well, he was only benched for 1 game, so you can bring him in with Bo, but that does kind of seem to be the case. And so I do think if it were up to me right now, I would probably have Milligan in the West for Saskatchewan and Bo in the East as the nominees. And the way things are going, that could very easily be 2 players not on playoff teams, but that's just how this season has gone this year.
It's wild. Look, we have some time. We got Morley. I know we got to get you out of here real quick. I want to get to the final question here. Quite simply, what's the game of the week?
AJ, go ahead.
Well, I want to see if Morley can sell me, because Peter's not selling me no matter what on SAS Calgary. Bubs, Toronto Hamilton's a good game, but you're not selling me on that this week. Maybe Morley can sell me on 1 point, but it's Ottawa, Montreal. It's the 2 best records in the league. But I think more important, when you look at what it's all about the Grey Cup. And for Montreal this week, this is a game that essentially gets them one win away from the Grey Cup. If they win this football game, they've got a 3-game lead with 4 games left, and they'll have won the tiebreak against Ottawa. So that race is over. If the Redblacks win, now we got a race. Now it's a 1-game lead, and the tiebreaker is still up for grabs, and they play again Thanksgiving Monday in Montreal. So to me, without a doubt, Ottawa-Montreal, that is not a homer pick. It's just more because of just Montreal, what it could mean for them if they win this football game. It is clearly the CFL game of the week. Morley, can you sell me on Edmonton, Winnipeg?
Well, first off, Ottawa and Montreal are two teams that are going to be in the playoffs, so there's really no drama there. They're just fighting for first place. Nobody needs first place, right? I think Winnipeg and Edmonton, probably the game of the week, just because of the situation they're in. Winnipeg tied for first place after what did they have? Were they 0-5 to start before they won a game? Now they're tied. 0-4. Now they're tied for first place in their division. Edmonton 0-7 to start the year for the second straight year. They've come to life, and they're 2 wins back. And I mean, quite honestly, one of these two teams could be in first place, when the next 2 weeks is over, because I think part of picking the game of the week this week is saying they play again next week. So this week's game is going to kind of lay the groundwork for that. So I think the importance of the game is incredible. And then throw in, you got the Twins playing each other for the first time ever in a CFL game, Trey and Tyrell Ford. Trey's going to be throwing to receivers that Tyrell's going to be covering. Tyrell leads the league, I believe, or tied for the league lead in interceptions, or one off. That, to me, is going to be very intriguing to watch this week, too. So for those multiple reasons, that, to me, is the game of the week.
So I actually have one more for you, Morley, and the only thing you could have sold me
I'm sorry, AJ, your time is up.
is the fact that, like, for Edmonton might be the most dangerous team in the league. And again, to me, I'm all looking towards the Grey Cup. And, like, these are huge games, clearly, from an Edmonton standpoint. Like, if Edmonton finds a way to win and they get themselves into the playoffs, all of a sudden we could be looking back at the end of the season and saying, okay, Edmonton won the Grey Cup, but it was these games here against Winnipeg that maybe pushed them over the line to get to that point. So you can maybe sell me on that. It is going to be a great game. I'm intrigued from out east for sure, but I'm still picking on
AJ's now arguing my points. I don't understand it.
I never thought about that, Morley. I really should have. The fact that, could you imagine, of course, because they're from Niagara Falls, like a pick six on your brother. Like, that's incredible. Imagine if that were to actually happen.
Oh, wouldn't that be good around the dining room table at Christmas time?
It really would be. All right, Kleinsy, what do you got for us?
Look, I would love to sell the Saskatchewan-Calgary one. It would be a bit tough. Normally, you would say, well, one of them has to win, but both have proven this year that's not necessarily accurate because they both have ties. So even that part of it is a little bit out. I do think maybe it's Western bias showing. I do think it's Edmonton against Winnipeg. Winnipeg, the comeback story and all of that, and Edmonton, the real comeback story and all that. And if Edmonton wins, all of a sudden they're at 12 and 2 points out of first place. And then who knows what happens in Saskatchewan and Calgary. But we could absolutely end this week with 4 teams within 2 points of each other for first place in the CFL's West Division. And Edmonton could go from being bottom in the league, firing coaches, and at 0-7 to hosting a playoff game. And so the implications for that are, I think, huge. To your guys' point, I don't think there really is a dud in the bunch, but I do think that Edmonton and Winnipeg kind of playing the main event on Saturday is the game of the week.
Western bias all the way. It's wet. Like, Bubs, you got to really stand up for the East. Imagine Kansas City and Baltimore.
Come on.
You're picking something 5-8 versus 6-7 for the game of the week. Bubs, stand up for the East.
Look, guys, there aren't a whole lot of times the West can claim Western bias on things. All right, this is the only league we get something up on Ontario, so just let us have this, okay? You get the Toronto and Ottawa and all that stuff coverage in the NHL all the time. Let us have this one.
You think I want to see Leafs coverage?
What does all this have to do with Austin Matthews?
Exactly. Guys, you guys have been tremendous. I know we're a little short on time, but thank you so much for participating on the CFL this week. Another hard-hitting issue. Sorry about my power outage, but I mean that's the way it goes sometimes. Morley, people want to chat with you about these crazy Double E and their run that they're on, and who knows what happens going into next week. How can they contact you?
I'm on the TwitX at Morley_Scott. That's probably the best way to talk to me. And I'll give a shameless plug for my podcast, Antler Up, which is available on all your podcast platforms. Last week's guest was Odell Willis. If you want an hour of fun and great stories, have a listen to that one.
What did you call it? The TwitX?
The TwitX.
I've never heard that because I refuse to call it X. That's just me.
Well, nobody calls it X anyway. It's always X, formerly known as Twitter. So I've just combined the two.
AJ, obviously, lots of stuff going on in the nation's capital. The Senators, as we're talking about hockey, maybe this is a big year for them to get into the postseason. I know you're a kind of hockey and football guy. You do it all, actually. But if they want to chat with you about these Redblacks and finally making the postseason, how can they do so?
Yeah, at the Super AJ on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. So just the drive every Monday to Friday, 2 to 6 on TSN 1200.
Just quick question, like you are like the world traveler, brother. Like where are you going next? What's your next plan?
Non-work related. After the CFL season, 5 nights in New Orleans, LSU, Oklahoma on the Saturday, and Saints Rams on the Sunday. Which all of a sudden the Saints are pretty good, so feels like I've got 2 pretty good football games, along with a lot of good food to eat.
First, he's going to Montreal for the second best game of the week, though.
Well, if I'm going to Montreal this week, it'll be the 5th best game of the week because the game's in Ottawa and TD plays Morley.
Oh, it's in Ottawa. Okay.
Seriously, if you follow AJ on Instagram, he's like the only guy I know that goes to like Czechia for the weekend. Like it's amazing, for crying out loud.
And those food pictures too, man.
He's the best. He's the best. Peter, where can you find you? I know certainly on the couch. Where can we find you?
Yes. Yeah, I'm jealous of Antler Up. That's an amazing name for podcast. But yes, Couch Potato Diary. I do it 4 days a week. Now doing it live 3 days a week. Twitch.tv/primetimepk. And you can find me on social media. The best I've heard is someone called it Twix. So you can find me on Twix at Primetime Klein.
Hey, folks, remember, the Ticats Audio Network is the place where you can find all kinds of outstanding CFL content. Of course, we have the Ticats covered daily. Big game, of course. I think it's the game of the week. It's the Tiger Cats and Argonauts getting ready, and who knows about
now
this
that's
playoff
Eastern
push.
bias right there.
Folks, stick up for the East, folks. Stick up for the East. This has been the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm Bubba O'Neil. We'll catch you next week.